Good Sunday morning. It is November the 11th. News Channel 8 is your local election headquarters, and this is Politics on Your Side. It's the week of an election, which means Florida's going to Florida. 3 statewide races are being recounted. The process officially started just a half hour ago. Included are the 2 most high-profile contests, the race for governor and for U.S. Senate. Amanda Shivari is live in Pinellas County, where officials are beginning the process. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning to you, Evan. We are in the back warehouse where right now they are bringing in ballots. So let me show you how this works. The forklift that you see over in the distance is running back and forth between this room that we're standing in and a secure locker where the ballots have been kept in since Election Day, since they've arrived in the mail. What you see on these mail carts right now is those ballots that are in these bins that these election workers are loading onto these mail carts. After they are filled up, they will be moved into the room where they will be tabulated, ran through 5 of these high-speed machines that will be recounting these ballots here in Pinellas County. The ballots are about 440,000 of them that will have to be recounted by the end of this week. They have until about 3 p.m. on Thursday to complete this part of the recount process. Then if these contests are still within 0.25% between the people running for the positions, they will have to be triggered into a manual recount, meaning the election workers will be recounting these ballots by hand. You can see the process working here this morning. These gentlemen working very fast to get these ballots on these mail carts and into the room where they will be tabulated. We know that earlier this morning, the machines were tested for both accuracy, also making sure that they were going through the process quickly. I asked the Board of Election Supervisor how fast could they get this recount done by machine. She says she just doesn't know. Throughout the day, they're going to be able to get a better process of how many ballots they are processing each hour, and then she should have an idea of when they will get this process, the 440,000 ballots completed. But obviously she wants to get that done before the 3 p.m. Thursday deadline. Evan, back to you.
Great stuff. Amanda Shivari live in Pinellas County with a look at the actual recount going on right now. Let's get to the newest numbers. The race between incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson and Governor Rick Scott in the U.S. Senate race now just separated by 12,562 votes, just over 12,000 votes. Governor Rick Scott is in the lead there. That is just a 0.15% margin, incredibly tight. The governor's race also just hitting the margin for a recount there. Republican Ron DeSantis leading over Andrew Gillum by just 0.41%. The 3rd statewide contest headed for a recount is the Agriculture Commissioner race. Democrat Nikki Fried now leading Matt Caldwell by just 0.06%. So tight. The most watched race and the most expensive in Florida history is the U.S. Senate race, and it's already full of drama. Governor Rick Scott claimed victory with a speech on election night, despite the fact that Senator Bill Nelson had not yet conceded. As ballots continued to be counted and in some cases found, Scott gave an impromptu press conference Thursday night, ripping into Palm Beach and Broward counties, alleging incompetence, fraud, and outright theft of the election.
Both Broward and Palm Beach counties have failed in their duty to follow Florida law, which requires that vote by mail and absentee ballots are counted within 30 minutes of polls closing.
Here's what the Florida law says about that part of what the governor is talking about. In Statute 102.141, the canvassing board shall report all early voting and all tabulated vote by mail results to the Department of State within 30 minutes after the polls close. Governor Scott made several other claims, and there are a lot of questions about what is happening down in Palm Beach and Broward counties. Here to help us break it down is Regina Kardash, a Florida Bar Board certified attorney in city, county, and local government law. You've represented multiple municipal clients here in the Bay Area, including serving as the town attorney for Indian Shores and Bel Air Shore.
Yes, I have. I've also served for Bel Air Shore as their elections official, and I've also served in that capacity for Indian Rocks Beach as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Welcome to you. Thanks for being here. You heard that claim from Governor Scott just now. Is he right that all vote by mail and early voting results are due within 30 minutes of polls closing, or just the ones that have been tabulated? That word right there sort of creates some ambiguity.
Right. The tabulation is what's important in uploading those, and they should be already tabulated by that point. So the day prior to the polls opening, they actually begin to upload by 7 p.m. the ballots that they've already received for the vote by mail and also for any of the early voting ballots that are already turned in. Now, they don't have to wait until that point in time. They can actually start as early as 6 days prior. There's a Division of Elections opinion out there that says you don't have to wait until that point in time to go ahead and start uploading these, or I'm sorry, tabulating them. There's a difference between tabulating and uploading them. That you don't have to wait to tabulate them.
You can do that earlier.
Yeah, you can
but you just can't release them.
Correct, and you can't release any of the information even once you've uploaded it the day before until after the polls close.
So are they breaking the law by not having all the vote by mail and absentee ballots counted by 30 minutes after the close of the polls on Election Day?
That's a gray area.
Yeah, because that word tabulated sort of makes it kind of ambiguous.
Right. There wouldn't be a lawsuit, I don't feel like, if there wasn't at least a question here of whether or not this is a hard, something that they have to do.
Sure.
The recount, on the other hand, that's mandatory under the state statute.
Yeah, let's get to some of the other claims made by Governor Rick Scott during that impromptu press conference. He said Palm Beach County refusing to provide info to the public. Also, that it was, quote, illegally refusing to allow official party representatives access into the ballot counting area and forcing people to stand behind a glass wall with limited visibility and no ability to hear what's going on. That's why I asked Amanda Shavari that question about whether she was allowed in just a few minutes ago. Palm Beach County also failing to update reports every 45 minutes until results are completely reported, according to Governor Scott. Now, I believe those are all in Florida law, correct?
Those are all in Florida law. That is correct. So after that initial 30-minute report, then every 45 minutes until they have completed tabulating the polling place results, they have to report to the Department of State what the outcomes are. Now, specifically with the public access to the polling areas, there's minimum security measures that they have from the Division of Elections that tell you how much you have to have that area secured.
Okay.
And what they actually do is typical in terms of having that glass wall, but every facility and every Division of Elections is different. Not all of them are so separated, but in Pinellas we have that in order to maintain the integrity of our ballots and make sure that the people who have access to that area are the people that are supposed to have access to that area. And you don't just let anybody into the area where the ballots are. And actually, it's a violation of law for anybody besides designated officials to handle these ballots.
Right, I would imagine. So 2 more questions, about 30 seconds for each. Florida law spells out who should be a part of the county canvassing boards that certify results. They include the chair of the county commissioners. The law says in the event any member of the county canvassing board is a candidate who has opposition in the election being canvassed or is an active participant in the campaign or candidacy of any candidate who has opposition in the election being canvassed, such member shall be replaced. Does that go for statewide races as well? Should Governor Scott not be a member of that election commissions board?
It does not. The way that this particular piece of legislation was drafted, they intentionally left that requirement out from the governor and members of his cabinet. And he does have discretion as to which members of his cabinet. There's 2, I believe, under the state statute. There's 2 that would be available to serve with him.
So even though potential conflict of interest, not illegal?
There is still conflict of interest provisions that are going to apply regardless. Under Chapter 112, when there is a conflict of interest, you're prohibited from making a determination on anything that's going to directly inure to your personal benefit.
Right.
And I think that given those types of laws, he would be precluded from making a decision that's going to directly affect his particular outcome in that race.
Regina Kardash, thank you for digging into the election law with us. We really appreciate you coming in here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, folks, we will be right back. Welcome back. Here to help us break down what's happening in this recount process, provide some historical context, and talk about the midterm elections as a whole are Regina Kardash, who you just know, a local government attorney, as well as Peter Schorsch, the publisher of FloridaPolitics.com. Thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So first things first, let's talk about the race between Scott and Nelson. One of the questions we didn't get to, Regina, that I wanted to ask you about, Palm Beach and Broward County still counting some of these ballots.
Right.
Is that abnormal? Should voters at home look at that as being somewhat shady?
They should have already had those done. They should have had their preliminaries done by 5 hours after the close of polls on Election Day.
Okay. Now, one of the things we talked about yesterday is possibly some part of this could be a lack of resources. I know,
Yes.
you mentioned that, county election boards have been gutted, especially since the economic downturn, because obviously, property values go down, local
Yes.
governments have less money. Is that part of it? Or again, should voters be looking at this like, something fishy's going on here?
If you want to have things work smoothly and run right, then you have to fund them appropriately and make sure that these offices have the resources that they need to get the job done that you need them to get done. If you cut funding and don't appropriately make sure that you have the staff and everything available to these offices, then they're not going to be able to complete what the mandates are. That's why we have in Florida law, the unfunded mandate law.
Peter, is this not enough resources, or is it something shady going on there?
I like shady as a legal term that you're using, and fishy. I don't know if they are, but yes, there's absolutely something fishy going on. You can be outraged at what's going on, but I don't think that there's fraud that's going on. And that's what the Republicans are, for the most part, arguing. That's what Marco Rubio is on fire on Twitter arguing for. That's what Matt Gaetz is arguing, that there's something fraudulent going on. I don't think that there's something fraudulent. I don't think that there's something malevolent going on, but there's absolutely something incompetent going on.
Right. And you talk about that incompetence. In Broward County Supervisor of Elections, Brenda Snipes, has a lengthy history with this sort of thing, including some trouble with the law about it. On top of that, the ballot itself is being questioned down in Broward. More than 25,000 people in Broward missed voting for the Senate race compared to the governor's race. That is now twice the amount of votes that currently separate Scott and Nelson. Take a look at the ballot here. You can see the two circles. The one circle on the bottom left, underneath the instructions, that's the U.S. Senate race. On the top of the second column, that is the governor's race. Again, 25,000 difference. It's called undervoting, right, Regina?
Correct.
When you don't vote for one race compared to another. That's very significant because obviously it's twice the amount of the difference, so it could be very big, especially in a very blue county. But doesn't that sort of point back to the supervisor of elections not doing her job the right way?
It does. Brenda Snipes has a history, like you said, of incompetence. I mean, she was destroying ballots last year, or in the last election cycle, between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Tim Canova. And remember, Broward has a history of this. She was actually brought in to replace someone who Jeb Bush took out. So I don't know why we haven't sent in the National Guard to guard these elections at this point, because there's just such a level of incompetence and just like stupidity. I mean, why are you making it difficult for people to vote?
Regina, you were talking about how people vote on these ballots and what's accepted versus not accepted. I think we have some video that we can show you again of Broward County that I want to just get our viewers to see. But you were talking about those ballots and what gets counted. How do you determine voter intent?
Well, before we even get there, we have the machine recounts. And the machines, when they process these ballots through the machines, one of the things that they do is what's called outstack any ballots that are overvotes or undervotes. So an undervote is where you have a determination that's been left blank. There's nothing for the machine to read, there's no mark on it, and so that's considered an undervote. Then you have overvotes where there's multiple candidates or issues or answers to issues like our constitutional amendments marked to the point where the machine can't determine whether this is a vote for one person or the other or one issue or the other.
Okay.
Once those are outstacked, they constitute a specific number, and those are actually what gets counted in the manual revote.
So they don't go through and recount they don't recount everything by hand, just those?
Just the over and under votes.
All right, very interesting. All right, more to come on the midterm elections when we get back. Stay with us. Back now with our political panel for some analysis of the midterms. You were just talking to me, Regina, about some of the access that Governor Scott has to the public records law that gets him access to absentee ballots. What's that about?
Right, so we have very broad open government laws here in Florida that allow us to make public records requests, and that's part of what the lawsuit entails, where he sued Broward and Palm Beach County, claiming that they weren't responsive to his public records requests. There's an exception to public records laws, and there has to be a written legislative exemption in order for an entity that's subject to public records laws to deny an individual access to whatever it is that they're requesting. Now, under the elections laws, if he requested the absentee ballots, then there's actually an exception that allows him as a candidate that's on the ballot to get that information. And there was actually clarification and a Division of Elections opinions Division of Election opinion that was given to Pinellas County with respect to whether the individual only gets the ballots that are relative, the absentee ballot requests that are relative to them as a candidate, or if it's countywide. And the Division of Elections said, no, you give them the countywide information that they're asking for. So that may be relevant in the lawsuit that's going to play out with respect to the public records requests made to Broward and Palm Beach County.
That is interesting. I want to get to something about Governor Rick Scott. His campaign sent out an email yesterday, and I think we have a full screen graphic of it. It said, Florida sheriffs selflessly serve our communities each day and are dedicated to protecting the safety and rights of all Floridians. I am urging every sheriff in the state of Florida to watch for any violations during the recount process as outlined in Florida law. He then cited Florida Statute 102.091, duty of sheriff to watch for violations, appointment of special officers. Now, that's a valid instruction coming from the governor of the state, but here's the problem. That email came from his campaign. And for those of you at home, that's a big difference. They have to have separate staffs, separate funding for all of those. Is the governor blurring the lines here, Peter?
I think since Friday night, Rick Scott's looked really bad. When he went, or it's not since Friday night, since Tuesday night, when he went out and gave that press conference, it was Rick Scott 2011. He had been over the last couple of years growing into this grandfatherly figure and you know, trying to be more open to things, and now he is. It's like he's taken a page out of the Donald Trump playbook. And so you've got him calling on the FDLE, and the FDLE is saying, no, there's nothing going on there. You've got him calling on sheriffs. It's very authoritative right now. I think it's a very bad look. If he ends up winning, it's going to put a blemish on his getting up to Washington, D.C. Okay.
What's interesting about that too is with respect to any violations, whether they're civil or criminal in nature, we also have the Florida Elections Commission, which can make determinations, you know, on civil violations. If it rises to the level of criminal, which we kind of already discussed, that it doesn't appear that it does, but it may be negligent or a dereliction of duty. The Florida Elections Commission has jurisdiction over violations of Chapter 106 and 104, and they would be charged if somebody makes a complaint to them with investigating this and then issuing an opinion. Now, if it's a criminal violation, it's up to, you know, the local sheriff and state attorney's office to go ahead and prosecute that as appropriate. Gotcha.
Less than 30 seconds, really quick from either of you. Is any of this going to matter? Are any of these races going to be overturned?
I think the statistic I saw is that there's only been a change in 0.0016, the number of in recounts since, I think, 2000.
Wow.
I think there's been something like 27 statewide recounts throughout the country. It's not going to matter. Bill Nelson's going to be, or Rick Scott's going to be up in D.C.
Right.
It's highly unlikely. You don't usually see that recounts change the ultimate outcome of the election. However, it's such an important part of our democratic process and making sure that every vote counts that it's part of our law.
All right. Got to be right back. SNL's Kate McKinnon last night. She's a national treasure. Hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Thanks for joining us here, and happy Veterans Day.